the daily grind of doing calls, going to codes, or dealing with people in car wrecks, it catches up with you.
Is PTSD just an actual definition of what we used to call shell-shocked from our vets?
Nobody thought about it, sending me to a place where there's mass fatalities and dead bodies and what have you. And my dad had just passed.
Every generation comes up with a new name for what is really the pain of a warrior and the pain of people that respond to emergencies.
We're proud to be joined on Seat at the Table today again by Lisa Laris, Emergency Manager. Welcome back. Jim Brazel, Paramedic, Doctor. Welcome back to the table, sir. Kate Amatruda, an expert in traumatic stress. Excuse me, I'm stressed out just talking about it. Welcome to the table. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Justin.
So today we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart because everybody knows back in 2007, I suffered an on-the-job injury with the San Francisco Fire Department. The ceiling fell on me, knocked me down. It wasn't so much a physical injury, but it became an emotional injury. And it really scarred me. I became angry. I became frustrated. The wife tells me I wasn't communicating well. We had a 3-year-old and another baby on the way. And I needed an outlet for this stress. And I did reach out to our stress unit there in the San Francisco Fire Department. And through a number of people that I spoke with, it was decided that I should start a diary and really write down my thoughts and ideas and see if they started to evolve into anything that might point towards why I'm feeling this way. I got bumped on the head. It shouldn't have mattered so much. I didn't want to write a diary because, of course, I don't want to leave my diary in the firehouse. So I started an anonymous blog. Skip ahead, here we are on Seat at the Table. I found an outlet for my stress, for my anxiety, for my fear, and it flowed naturally. Not everybody has an outlet or an opportunity like that, am I correct?
Post-traumatic stress disorder is what I consider a silent epidemic in which it is career-ending injuries for first responders, EMTs, paramedics, doctors, nurses, soldiers, and it also affects people in their real life. If you've had a traumatic event happen to you, you can be predisposed to developing PTSD.
And I found that incidents that I respond to now affect me more emotionally.
That's right.
Since I've realized that I did suffer post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't to the extent that I thought, soldiers and people that were actually seriously injured in the line of duty would experience, but it really was my own. And this is something we need to be concerned about, but not really something that should scare us, correct?
Absolutely, and a good thing to do is to watch your buddy. Many of these agencies, you're paired with somebody and keep your eye out on your buddy. When I deploy with DMAT, which is Federal Disaster Medical Assistance Team, my job is force protection. That is, my first priority is the mental health of the team itself. And if I see somebody getting into what is considered the orange territory, we use a scale like the Homeland Security does, where green is you're good to go, you're hot to trot, everything's in a line. Yellow, mildly stressed, high blood pressure, autonomic nervous system is activated. Orange is you're getting into the danger zone, and then you're more susceptible to injuries that are either from fatigue, from trauma, from a loss. Any loss will affect you more if you're in the orange, and a moral injury. And then, of course, there's the red, and the red is full-blown PTSD. So if your buddy is going into the yellow or into the orange, then it's time for you to intervene and say, hey, talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Share with me.
Now, a term that I've heard thrown around a lot, some of the old timers in the firehouse, is they're shell-shocked.
Yes.
Is PTSD just an actual definition of what we used to call shell-shocked from our vets?
To some degree, yes, because part of PTSD is shock and is a kind of dissociative response, but shell shock doesn't really cover the whole gamut of what PTSD is. They called it soldier's heart after the Civil War, and it's been called battle fatigue. So every generation comes up with a new name for what is really the pain of a warrior and the pain of people that respond to emergencies and the pain of normal people who have been traumatized.
And we all react differently to these incidents. And Lisa, when you're going out with the DMAT and dealing with emergency management, Have you found that your reactions to some scenes are completely different from some of your fellow responders?
Absolutely.
And if so, how do you deal with that?
I think everybody's different on how they deal with it. I've been to a lot of incidents myself, DMAT in my normal job and with Red Cross, and I've unfortunately, I'm not going to say I've become numb to it, but I've learned how to deal with it better.
And it's important to reach out. You know, you mentioned it, Kate, watch your buddy.
That's
But
right.
we also need to be our own advocate
That's
as
right.
well. And when we start having these feelings that, you know, maybe I don't like this job, you know, I'm upset at home because all I'm thinking about is this incident, we really do need to reach out in our community and in our employment to find those resources. Jim, speaking towards critical incident stress management, debriefing, what are some of the tools that are available in your community for responders if they feel this way?
There was a group of us back in the day, before we even had this, that for myself, I felt like I needed to talk to people after things like this happened. And I could see in partners that I had that things were building up. Even when there wasn't a critical incident happening, the daily grind of doing calls, going to codes, or dealing with people in car wrecks, it catches up with you. And to the point where we really knew we wanted something out there, but we didn't know what to ask for. And it wasn't until like about 1996 really that we organized a group of people to learn how to be a peer counselor. What's available to them now is abundant compared to what we had. Now there's a large cadre of people that stay trained, go to extra training, and really invest themselves into being on call for zero money at all, just volunteering their time for their colleagues.
And it sounds to me like that would be a benefit to your community. Can you think of anything in your experience, an incident maybe you responded to that affected you one way before this program was in place and then after? And if you have that experience, can you compare and contrast the two?
Absolutely. So I was a preceptor for a very, very long time. And there were two incidences that I can speak to. One prior to our training and submission to the International Incident Stress Foundation and their teachings on how to deal with these things. And I'll take you all the way back to 1995, before we learned that. I had a new hire that was riding along in my ambulance. She was an EMT, and we'll call her KP, because I don't want to share any names, and I'm not really going to talk about where we were. We got sent on a call. It was a Sunday night, early in the evening, right around 4 or 5 o'clock, and we were sent to a community center for a cardiac arrest. Well, it turned out that the cardiac arrest was a 7-year-old. And this 7-year-old was in an unheard of rhythm. It was a VFib arrest on a 7-year-old. You never get that call. So fire was understandably sort of stressed when we got there. We came in, and in those days it was BLS fire. So we took the reins as ALS providers. We provided the support and airway, and we ran the code. And I put this new EMT at the head with the ambu bag, put her in the ambulance, and she was bagging this 7-year-old all the way to the hospital. We turned over care to the hospital, and I noticed her as I was writing the PCR that she was sort of withdrawn and sitting in the corner. And I got to talk to her a little bit after that and said, "So, tell me what's going on." Well, it turned out she had 3 kids, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
She was at the end of her didactic for paramedic school, and this call essentially ended paramedic school for her entirely. She went on to have a very short career in EMS and disappeared. All I had to offer her was a supervisor that could talk to her. So we lost somebody that would be a potentially great paramedic to, an inconsequential call, a 7-year-old full arrest, which is serious enough for that family and serious enough for the responders. But we sacrificed a responder.
And now we know that there are certain keys we can look for to try to become active in that person's recovery
Absolutely.
from this situation. Now, real quick, Kate, we heard Jim mentioned withdrawal. He noticed his partner withdrawing into a corner. What are some of the other signs we might see of someone who's starting to experience this stressful event that we might be able to key off that maybe I do need to reach out and help them?
Probably the most dangerous is the 1,000-yard stare, when somebody is just frozen staring and they're totally gone. But you might see some restless agitation, you might see tears, you might see what is affect that would be considered too much for the incident. And there's a lot of predisposing things to look for too. This woman obviously had her own 7-year-old at home. If she'd also had a serious loss in her life right around the time or prior to this incident, that would predispose her toward post-traumatic stress disorder. If people that have had difficult childhoods tend to be more predisposed. In the military, we're seeing a lot of comorbid PTSD along with mild traumatic brain injury, and sometimes it's even hard to differentiate the two.
And obviously it would be down the line, but maybe we notice the partner after this call is late for a couple of shifts, or when we're out with them socially, maybe drinking a little more, maybe not acting themselves. So it's important that we understand the risk factors as well as ways to spot so we can help our buddy.
Right.
Are there any other warning signs that we can watch out for, or things that maybe I can just look for?
I'm glad you mentioned substance abuse, because self-medicating is a key way that people go.
Especially in this line of work, yes.
Especially in this line of work. And that doesn't help. You think it helps at the moment, but using drugs or drinking alcohol just really doesn't help you get through it. You mentioned your own resistance to writing your blog, to writing your journal. Resistance is another sign of PTSD, because in order to deal with it, you have to go back into it, and nobody wants to go there. It's too painful.
I was embarrassed. I was worried that I would be embarrassed because I was sharing how I was feeling, but I found out that's what made me better, was sharing how I was feeling. Some people do it in a circle of chairs, maybe sitting at a table with a white tablecloth, with some cameras rolling, things like that. I'm still healing, and it's being able to share my experiences that helps me keep healing. But it's again, like you mentioned, it's the embarrassment. It's that sense that I don't really want anybody to know that, quote unquote, I'm not tough enough.
Exactly.
That really doesn't enter into it for PTSD.
It doesn't. It doesn't. The sad thing is, because it's been put as a psychiatric illness rather than a medical illness, there's a tremendous amount of shame involved.
And it's easy when we come in for shift and we lace up the boots, get the uniform on, we start to build this little wall.
Absolutely.
And we start to think that if I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, if I get a 5-year-old today, it's not mine. It's not mine. It's not mine. And I get that mantra in my head. If I see someone who reminds me of my mother, it's not mom. It's not mom. It's someone else. But when we're out in the community and we witness something happen, that can be powerful because we haven't had time to set up that mechanism. Now, Lisa, I understand you had something similar to that happen in your background?
At the time, I was working for the American Red Cross in Orange County. I was a disaster specialist with them. And the Alaskan airplane crash, which happened in January 31st of 2000, up here at Port Hueneme. And mind you, my dad had passed away the end of November, so it was only 2 months my dad had passed away, and I was sent to this airplane crash. Nobody thought about it, sending me to a place where there's mass fatalities and dead bodies and what have you. And my dad had just passed. I didn't think anything of it. It's something I've done, many times before, responding to a disaster. And I got there, and everything was fine for the first couple days. But when the rubble came up and the family members started coming on shore there. We were stationed at Port Hueneme right there on base. And family members came in. They had a special section for them, and we would go and talk to the family members. And they used one of the hangars as the morgue. And I remember the first time going in that morgue, the smell of formaldehyde that was being utilized. And to this day, if I smell formaldehyde, it actually brings me back to that point. So I was there for about 2 weeks, and dealing with not only the family members, but the bodies they were bringing in and what have you. And came back, and I was fine. They wanted everybody to go through a debriefing as a group. No, I'm fine. I don't need that. And I didn't. And it was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made, not going through something like that. Within a month, who's now my husband, but I had broken up with my boyfriend. So I became withdrawn from him, friends, colleagues at work. And I did. I started drinking a little more. I'm not going to say I was ever an alcoholic, but I just consumed a lot more probably than I should have at the time. And eventually, actually it took me years to realize that it was PTSD. It really did. And I became more focused in my career and stuff. Still to this day, I never have spoken to anybody professionally about it, but I've learned to deal with it and cope with it. Probably not the best way of action people should take, but that was how I did it. One of the other things that had happened to me when I was a kid, I was very sick as a teenager, back surgeries and everything. After this had occurred and friends would get sick or family, they would get sick or injured, I wouldn't be empathetic to them. My thought was, you know what, I've been through stuff far worse than that. I'm not going to feel sorry for you. I mean, I didn't act like that toward him, and it was just, and I never said that towards the other person. That's how I felt inside.
Yeah.
We call that the suck it up and keep driving school.
Oh, is that what
of
it is?
PTSD.
Oh, okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
Put that on a
I
t-shirt.
like that too.
Yeah.
That would be a good t-shirt.
And it's striking, you know exactly the day it happened. I'm sure you know the day the ceiling fell on you. That's one marker of PTSD, when you know the exact day and the exact moment, because it's embedded in your psyche. It becomes almost a cellular memory, and you can have an anniversary reaction to that. So that's
I've experienced
same
that,
day.
actually.
You have,
Yeah.
and if you don't know about it, it can really send you for a loop. If you don't know, okay, this is the anniversary of when I was injured, or when I was attacked, or when I had this bad call, and you're not aware of it, it can just send you into a tailspin, and the
It
drinking
really can.
starts again.
And you don't notice until 3 days later, when everyone's telling you that you're different, that you suddenly realize, oh, wait a second,
Yeah.
it's December 20th.
Right.
Yeah, it's been X amount of years and X amount of days. Now, real quick, Jim, I want to go back. We discussed a call that you went on where there was no mechanism to deal with
Zero
that
mechanism.
intern. What about an example that you've seen where there was a mechanism available and maybe it intervened in a positive manner?
Well, absolutely. That was not the only event that I got to witness. That's just one of many. And enter a person into my life that came from an AMR acquisition, and I worked in AMR, so we acquired a lot of mom and pop ambulances along the way, and we started integrating educators. And a person came up to Northern California. Her name was Sam Bradley, and she brought along with her CISM.
I know of this Sam Bradley of which you speak.
And we put together, with her help, an ICISF course, and I participated in teaching it with her and several other people who are still in the business, oddly enough, in other capacities. And we put together a very large team that covered most of Northern California's AMR divisions. And subsequently, still a preceptor working other calls, had a call with another intern, murder-suicide. The intern had quite a few years as an EMT under her belt. We walked into a house, murdered person on the Barcalounger, suicidal person out on the patio, didn't quite complete the job on himself. She completely froze, totally froze, to the point where we kind of had to push her out of the way into a policeman's arms. We ran the call, we got to kind of deal with her initial acute reaction and tell her, you know what, you don't fail, it's all right. It's the first time you've been in a scenario like this, it's okay to freeze. This is why you do an internship. So you freeze with me and my partner, and we can deal with it. Enter that fire department's diffusing team. So we had the police department and fire department's diffusers talk to her and us, and then 2 days later, we had a debriefing with everybody from the call. And she is a successful paramedic. She moved to another state. She's a nurse and a paramedic, does flight care, is an incredible pre-hospital provider. But I have a feeling that her career would have gone the same way as the first person that I talked about had she not had that intervention and the diffusing and the debriefing offered to her.
So it's clear that this clearly works.
Absolutely.
If you let it work, and to borrow a slogan from another successful program, it works if you work it.
It does. And I know that there are a lot of physicians that are huge educators in the business that say it doesn't work. But I think that they're saying it doesn't work when it's not managed correctly. And that would be true. it has to be managed correctly, and there has to be people that are in the system, proper mental care people, mental health people that know how to deal with a paramedic and an EMT, properly trained peer counselors that know how to deal with their own people and when to refer up. You know, we train the peer counselor to be ears and listen, and provide that initial, confirmation that no, it's not wrong that you're responding this way. All the things you talked about early on, that you were afraid to talk about your incident. Well, absolutely you were, because that's the culture we're in EMS. Suck it up, right? The burned out paramedic that says you're not that sick starts saying that to himself, because years and years and years of the calls for people that really aren't that sick, that are looking for a sandwich and a bed, those wear on you, along with all the codes and car wrecks and dead babies. Those all wear on you.
It's a spiral. It's a negative feedback loop. Unless you reach out.
It is, and fatigue, vicarious traumatization is a part of post-traumatic stress disorder.
We are learning that 24-hour shifts are not healthy.
Right.
And until we get a better way to run a fire service or an EMS service, that's what we're set with. But now we have the tools to deal with that unhealthy side by treating our mental health. And I can see no better way than to not forget the EMS provider in this respect.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, in your situation with the plane crash, do you think you would have healed quicker or had a better experience had you taken part in that debriefing?
I know I probably would have, yes.
Yeah.
But I had the attitude that, I'm fine. Anything, so
And you can
absolutely.
speak from personal experience to our audience that mindset does not help.
It does not help at all. Matter of fact, after I came back and I went through all this with Red Cross, they researched the whole PTSD thing, and you're not allowed to go on a mass fatality now for, I think, a year after a close family member passes. So
It's a good idea. That's someone
Yes.
recognizing from what happened before and putting it into action. Kate, and just to draw a conclusion to our discussion here today, if I'm not feeling comfortable reaching out to my department for whatever reason, if I'm depressed, if I'm starting to notice that maybe I'm experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, who should I be reaching out to if not my employer?
Well, I would start with your family. Start with your family and friends. And then if you're still not getting the help that you need, pick up the phone and call the EAP, call your family doctor, call a therapist, get some help. The other thing I think it's important to differentiate is within 30 days of an incident, it's not called post-traumatic stress disorder, it's called an acute stress disorder.
Okay.
And then it takes, after 30 days, it's PTSD. And during those first 30 days is a huge window of opportunity. That's before our brains have somehow made the story set in stone so much. So if you are noticing it, and it's within the first 30 days or after the first 30 days, but certainly within, reach out, pick up the phone, talk to somebody. Don't suffer alone, because these are career-ending injuries.
Yes, and I started to experience that. I'm glad I
Absolutely.
reached out in the way that I did, and I got lucky, I think, in the reaction that I had to it. So, Kate Amatruda, Lisa Laris, Jim Brazel, thank you very much for pulling up a chair and having a seat at the table. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Justin.